Tammy Slaton had always lived under the kind of spotlight that burned hotter than most people could stand. Fame came with its own set of shadows, and lately, those shadows had begun to stretch longer around her. It wasn't just the cameras or the followers, or even the constant scrutiny. It was something quieter, something heavier. A sense that the world was watching her too closely, listening too carefully, and fearing the worst whenever her voice wavered even slightly. And this time, it did more than waver. It sent fans spiraling into concern. It began with a TikTok. A simple video, the kind Tammy thought nothing of posting. Nothing dramatic. No grand message. Just her holding a bouquet of flowers, a small Christmas tree lit with soft yellow bulbs, and a plush Stitch toy nestled in her arms. But sometimes the smallest things turn into storms online. And this one did. Her voice, a little raspy, a little tired, and softer than usual, drifted across the audio. But what she meant to say, what she did say, twisted and bent in the ears of countless viewers. That's how fast worry spreads in the world of 1,000-pound Sisters fans. Tammy had said she had been sick. Sick for a week. Just worn down in that familiar way her body still fought against, even after the weight loss. She spoke about coming home to see her favorite stuffed toy, how the sight of that little Stitch doll somehow made the world feel a little more manageable. And she mentioned that the flowers, the tree, and the gifts were from her fiancé, Andrew Dalton. A sweet, simple message. Sweet enough that she ended the video with something like a smile in her voice, a quiet little, "Could life get any better?" But the internet heard something else entirely. One user paused the video, replayed it, typed out their confusion in the show's main Reddit thread. "Is Tammy okay?" Another added, "Did she say she was sick, like hospitalized sick?" Someone else chimed in, "Did she say she was somewhere else? Did she say she was at a hospital?" And the speculation spread, comment by comment, stretching the uncertainty into something bigger, heavier, more ominous than anything Tammy had actually said. The concern was genuine, but the panic? That was on the fans. It wasn't long before someone clarified things. They slowed the video down. They listened carefully. They transcribed every word. And finally, the confusion settled. What Tammy had said was simple. Been sick for the last week. And I come home, and I see my favorite toy Stitch. He's my favorite. Nothing more. Nothing less. But the internet rarely settles for simplicity. Another fan in the comment section added a new layer, one that reignited the worry. They wrote that Tammy had been in the hospital. Not long, not dramatically, but enough that she missed a meet and greet. Enough that her brother Chris had mentioned it when a fan saw him the day before. Enough that the puzzle pieces came together into a story that felt all too familiar for longtime viewers. It wasn't a dramatic emergency. It wasn't something catastrophic. But it was something. And when it comes to Tammy Slaton, something has always been enough to stir fear. The fan wrote, "Chris told me she was sick in the hospital when I saw him yesterday. I went to meet them, and she wasn't able to come." And suddenly the whispers turned into a collective inhale. For years, viewers had watched Tammy's body fight her. They'd watched her struggle under the crushing weight of over 700 pounds, then slowly and painfully climb out of that dark place. They'd watched her conquer goals, suffer setbacks, fall in love, break down, get back up, and fight for every inch of her health. So when she said she'd been sick, fans didn't hear a casual statement. They heard fear. They heard memory. They heard echoes of every moment her health had once slipped into dangerous territory. One Redditor wrote, "Something I have always worried about for Tammy is lingering health issues. Even though she's lost so much weight, these things don't always just go away." Another added, "The effects of being over 700 pounds never go away. I hope she recovers soon." On TikTok, commenters flooded her video. "Hope you feel better soon, Tammy. We miss you. Can't wait for next season. You look so happy with Andrew, sending love." There was love, concern, hope, all mingling together in a way that only this kind of fandom could produce. The same people who once watched her fight for her life now watched her build a future with a man who adored her. The stakes felt different now. Higher. More fragile. Tammy's silence after the video only added to the uncertainty.
No clarifications.
No follow-ups. Just that single moment captured in soft lighting, her voice tired, her eyes warm, and fans left to piece together meaning in the spaces between her words. Meanwhile, the future of the show that had introduced Tammy to the world had its own storm brewing. Season 7 had aired its finale in June. Season 8 hadn't been confirmed. And every break in filming, every quiet month, every small update from the cast felt like another clue that the end might be approaching. Fans argued about it endlessly, in comment sections, Reddit threads, and Facebook groups. Some said the show was over. Others claimed the network was just negotiating. A handful insisted that the cast was done with it, that they wanted privacy. But a few eagle-eyed viewers had seen something else entirely. Sightings. A Reddit user posted a blurry photo of Tammy Slaton and her new husband, Brian Lavorne, walking through New Orleans, camera crew in tow, boom mic looming over them, producers trailing behind. The photo was dated September. They were filming 1,000-Pound Sisters, the user said. Whole team of cameras and producers. Definitely for the show. Another person commented that they lived about 2 hours from the Slatons, and a full production crew had been spotted filming in their town the week prior. They're filming now, they wrote. I saw them at Amy's house. One more comment chimed in. I saw cameras outside the new place in October. It's happening. So while fans worried about Tammy's health, the larger machine of the show seemed to be moving quietly in the background. There were weddings, engagements, recovery updates, transformations, family feuds, new beginnings, everything that kept viewers glued to the screen. Amy had married Brian on Halloween, a bright, bold, haunted house-style celebration that fans couldn't stop talking about. Meanwhile, Tammy had gotten engaged to Andrew Dalton in June, showing off a new ring, a new smile, and a new chapter she never thought she'd reach. Their story wasn't slowing down. It was expanding, changing, becoming something different. And yet, Tammy's moment of sickness, small as it was, cast a shadow long enough to remind everyone how fragile that story still could be. She had lost over 500 pounds. Amy had lost nearly 200. Both had undergone bariatric surgery, Amy in 2019, Tammy in 2022. Skin removal surgery had reshaped Tammy's appearance again, leaving her staring at the mirror in quiet disbelief during Season 7. It's gonna take a while for me to get used to seeing myself like this, she had said. And even though the transformation was miraculous, the reality was that bodies remember. Stress remembers. Systems weakened over time don't fully forget the years they endured. So fans worried. They watched. They rewatched the TikTok. They listened for signs in her voice. They waited for updates, any update. Because after following Tammy this long, they knew that every small dip could be the beginning of something bigger. Or it could be nothing more than a passing illness. A human moment. A reminder that weight loss didn't make her invincible. As the speculation swirled, the video stood frozen in time, Tammy smiling faintly, holding her gifts, trying to sound cheerful despite the fatigue she didn't hide. It was a reminder that even now, after everything she had overcome, people still cared enough to panic when she whispered, "I've been sick." And as fans typed their messages of love and worry, one question lingered. Was this just a passing cold, or the beginning of another challenge Tammy hadn't yet revealed? The worry surrounding Tammy didn't fade quickly. It lingered in the air like a slow-moving storm cloud, the kind that never outright bursts but settles over everything, shaping the mood, shaping the conversation, shaping the way people looked at each new update. And as fans replayed her TikTok over and over, the story kept evolving, because when you follow someone's life as closely as viewers follow Tammy's, even silence becomes a kind of message. Meanwhile, the world around the Slaton sisters kept moving. Life didn't pause, even when the audience wished it would, even when the health scares triggered deep, familiar anxieties. And as the days passed, the attention shifted from, is Tammy okay right now, to something bigger, something looming over everything, the future of 1,000-Pound Sisters itself. Ever since the Season 7 finale aired, The fandom had been split into two emotional camps, the ones convinced the show would continue and the ones bracing for it to end. On Reddit, the debates were endless. "It's obvious the show is done," some said. "The ratings dropped. The network is quiet. The cast is living their own lives, not filming anymore." But others fired back with equal certainty. "Trust me, they're filming. My cousins saw the crew. There were production vans in town. Amy was mic'd up in public. That means something." These weren't passive viewers. They knew the cast's history, their milestones, their patterns. They read between the lines. And when you've followed the Slatons for years, every tiny detail, a ring, a location tag, a suspicious background figure with headphones on, becomes a clue in a much bigger narrative. One photo changed the conversation entirely. It was uploaded by a fan who claimed they had just been in New Orleans when they spotted Amy and her new husband, Brian Lavorne. It wasn't a blurry, faraway shot. It was close enough to see the lights of the cameras, the handheld rigs, the sound guy with his boom pole raised high over the couple. Producers surrounded them like a moving bubble. And Amy, in a bright outfit, hair styled, smiling with that mixture of nerves and excitement she always had when filming, looked every bit like someone who is still part of an ongoing story. There was a whole team of cameras and producers with them, the fan wrote. The comments section exploded. "This confirms it. No way they'd bring a whole crew unless season 8 is happening. New Orleans storyline? Interesting. Maybe they're shooting the wedding stuff now." Another user added their own experience. "We live about 2 hours away. They filmed in my town last week." And yet another wrote, "I literally saw them at Amy's house. Cameras everywhere." It was undeniable. Something was happening. The show wasn't as dead as some had assumed. But the excitement over filming sightings didn't erase the anxiety fans still felt for Tammy. If anything, it complicated it. Because the reality of the Slaton story, the heart of the entire series, was built on the knife-edge balancing act between progress and danger, hope and fear, triumph and collapse. And even with cameras rolling somewhere, the questions still lingered. What would Tammy's storyline look like now? She had come so far. When the series first premiered in 2020, Tammy weighed 608 pounds. Amy weighed 406. Together, their combined weight hovered around the symbolic 1,000-pound mark that gave the show its name. But what fans saw was never just numbers. It was struggle. It was exhaustion. It was laughter through pain and pain through laughter. It was two sisters leaning on each other through circumstances most people couldn't fully understand. Back then, Tammy's mobility was limited. Her health was fragile. Her motivation came and went like unpredictable waves. And every season felt like watching someone fight underwater, desperate, slow, and fighting against something heavy that pulled her deeper. But by season 7, the transformation was nothing short of astonishing. Tammy had lost over 500 pounds. She'd gone through bariatric surgery. She'd completed rehab. She'd worked with therapists. She'd undergone loose skin removal surgery, a step she'd once thought impossible. Where there had once been oxygen tubes and wheelchairs, now there were car rides, grocery trips, vacations, and long walks filmed with the kind of joy that didn't feel staged. She laughed easier. She breathed easier. She dreamt bigger. And part of that dream had grown into something Tammy herself had believed she would never have, a future with a partner she truly loved. Her engagement to Andrew Dalton had surprised many, not because of the relationship itself, but because of what it meant symbolically. For so long, Tammy's story revolved around survival. But this was different. This was about living, about planning, about imagining a life beyond crisis management. In a way, the gifts he left for her, the flowers, the small Christmas tree, the plush Stitch toy, were more than just sweet gestures. They were symbols of stability, of normalcy, of a life where love found its way into spaces that once belonged only to fear. That's why her TikTok felt so powerful, even if unintentional. Her voice was soft, tired, and sick, but surrounded by love. Her hands held something gentle. Her eyes held something hopeful. And fans saw both sides at once. The progress, the fragility,
The light.
The worry. The possibility that everything she gained could be disrupted again. Somewhere inside that mix of emotions, a quiet truth sat heavy. Even after losing hundreds of pounds, her body would always remember the years it spent under stress. Health wasn't a switch that flipped. It was a lifelong negotiation. So, as fans listened to her say, "I've been sick for the last week," they couldn't help but picture the worst-case scenarios. Not because they doubted her strength, but because they understood the stakes. And behind the scenes, Tammy knew the stakes too. She'd felt them in her lungs, in her joints, in her breathing, in the silent moments when she lay in bed, feeling her body respond in ways it never had before surgery, both good and bad. But she also felt something new, the desire to protect her peace, which was why she didn't rush onto TikTok to clarify anything.
She didn't argue.
She didn't reassure. She didn't defend her health. She simply posted the video, smiled through her exhaustion, and let the viewers interpret it however they would. Meanwhile, the world around her, the one she couldn't control, kept spinning. Amy's whirlwind romance with Brian had been one of the most unexpected plot twists of the Slaton universe. After heartbreaks, arguments, custody struggles, and endless speculation about her love life, Amy found something solid with Brian. The two married on Halloween, a decision everyone instantly recognized as so Amy. Fun, dramatic, a bit spooky, a bit sentimental. A celebration that looked like a carnival ride crossed with a family reunion. Fans ate it up. And while Tammy recovered from her illness and focused on her relationship, Amy was settling into married life, parenting, filming, and adjusting to a new chapter that seemed almost too bright to be true. Their lives had always moved in parallel, one sister rising while the other fell, then switching places in a pattern that felt almost poetic. But now, for once, they both seemed to be climbing at the same time. Maybe not at the same speed. Maybe not with the same steps. But moving upward all the same. Which made Tammy's sudden sickness feel like a crack in the foundation. A reminder that even in moments of collective happiness, the past wasn't fully behind them.
Rede de reais multiplied.
TikTok comments flooded. YouTube commentators recorded reaction videos and breakdowns. People analyzed her tone, the lighting of the video, the background noises. Some insisted she looked fine. Others claimed she looked pale. Some speculated it was a respiratory infection. Others wondered if it was stress. A few whispered about old conditions resurfacing. And while fans debated, the cast continued filming somewhere, piecing together a new season that no one had officially announced. A season that, for the first time, wouldn't be about can Tammy lose enough weight? But something messier. More human. More real. A season about what happens after the success story. After the surgeries. After the transformations. After the goals have been met. Because no one teaches you how to live a normal life after you've spent years trying to save it. Tammy was learning that in real time. Amy was learning it too. Their family, their partners, their fans, all learning alongside them, witnessing every milestone and misstep through screens. And in the middle of all that, the simplest question still hung unanswered. Was Tammy's illness a brief stumble or the first sign of a deeper struggle returning? For now, all anyone could do was wait.
Watch. Speculate.
Hope. And after days of silence, fans began holding their breath for the next update, the next clue, the next video, the next moment where Tammy might reveal how she truly felt. Because sometimes the biggest storms start with the quietest sentence. In the days that followed Tammy's quiet TikTok, the atmosphere around her social media presence shifted. It wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable, like walking into a familiar room and realizing something on the shelf has moved just slightly out of place. Her fans felt it instantly. They had learned to read even her silences, to interpret the pauses between her updates as carefully as the updates themselves. Tammy had built a relationship with her viewers that most reality stars never reach. It wasn't polished. It wasn't curated. It wasn't packaged by a PR team or crafted with the right filters and hashtags. Her connection with fans was raw, unedited, and vulnerable. It came from years of watching her fight battles that were as visible as they were invisible. Her viewers didn't just see her life, they felt it. So when she disappeared for a few days, when the TikTok remained the only glimpse into her world, anxiety wove itself tightly through the fandom. On Reddit, a new post appeared every few hours. Any updates on Tammy? Has anyone heard anything? She hasn't posted again. Should we be worried? Maybe she just needs rest. She looked exhausted in the video. I hope she's okay. Some tried to calm the others. Some fed into the fear. And some simply waited, because waiting was all they could do. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, life for Tammy was moving at a slower pace, the kind of pace that comes naturally when your body forces you to rest. Being sick, even with something mild, hit her differently than it hit most people. Even as she recovered, her body still carried memories of the years it spent under strain, and fatigue lingered like a stubborn guest who refused to leave. But it wasn't just physical tiredness. It was emotional too. For years, Tammy had fought relentlessly, through medical emergencies, through rehab, through surgeries, through grief, through setbacks, through every harsh comment thrown her way. She'd carried the weight of public pressure as heavily as she had once carried her physical weight. And now, even after everything she had achieved, that pressure hadn't disappeared. It had simply changed shape.
People worried about her.
People speculated about her. People analyzed her appearance, her tone, her breathing, her posture. People loved her deeply, but watched her intensely. And Tammy, for all her strength, could feel it. While the fans argued online, another part of the story was unfolding far beyond Tammy's front door, in production offices, in filming locations, in the small towns that served as backdrops for 1,000-pound sisters. The show's future hung in a limbo that was both familiar and unsettling. On one side, the lack of an official Season 8 announcement cast a shadow over everything. Networks often made viewers wait, but this silence felt longer, heavier, and more uncertain than usual. On the other side, the sightings of camera crews told a completely different story. The New Orleans photos had ignited hope. The reports of filming outside Amy's home added fuel. Rumors trickled in from locals who saw production vans parked at diners, parks, and even church parking lots. Bit by bit, a picture formed. Season 8 wasn't canceled. It was simply under wraps.
But why?
Some fans theorized the network wanted a big reveal. Others believed the cast was negotiating for more control. Some thought producers were shifting the narrative, focusing less on weight loss and more on personal journeys, relationships, and family dynamics. And then there were the whispers about Tammy. A few fans speculated her recent illness could become a storyline. Others hoped she wouldn't be pressured to film during recovery. Some believed she was intentionally quiet because filming had resumed and confidentiality kept her from saying too much. But no one really knew. That was the thing about living your life in the public eye. The world always filled in the blanks, whether the blanks were accurate or not. As the community buzzed with theories, more details from Season 7 resurfaced in the discussions. The emotional episodes where Tammy confronted her old habits. The times she broke down, questioning whether she deserved happiness. The powerful scenes after her skin removal surgery, where she stared at her own reflection, struggling to reconcile the person she saw with the person she had been for decades. She had said, quietly, almost trembling, "It's going to take a while for me to get used to seeing myself like this." That line resonated far beyond the episode. It became a quote fans repeated, studied, and held on to. Because it wasn't just about physical appearance. It was about identity, about the painful process of becoming someone new while carrying the memories of the old. And now, in this uncertain moment, those memories felt closer than ever. Across social media, supporters tried to piece together Tammy's mood from her last video. The stitched doll in her hands, a childhood comfort symbol. The flowers, a gesture of care. The miniature Christmas tree, a sign that someone wanted to bring warmth into her home during a rough week. And then her soft voice saying, "Could life get any better?" Some believed it was genuine gratitude. Others thought it was her way of masking how poorly she felt. Others speculated she posted it for Andrew, showing appreciation for his kindness. No matter what the intention was, fans read into it. They couldn't help it. They cared too much. The truth was simple but heavy. When someone has come back from the brink as many times as Tammy has, every small hint of weakness feels like a return to danger. But Tammy wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, she had a partner who showed up, not only for the cameras but in the quiet moments no one saw. Andrew brought her gifts because he knew she needed comfort. He encouraged her to rest. He shielded her from the noise when she needed silence. Meanwhile, Amy had been busy building her new life with Brian, and her happiness radiated outward in a way that gave fans something to celebrate amid the uncertainty. Their Halloween wedding was still a hot topic online, not because of the spectacle, but because of how genuinely joyful she looked. People who had watched Amy through heartbreak after heartbreak felt relief seeing her smile, without reservation. Yet behind the smiles and celebrations, the weight of the unknown still pressed against the sisters' future. Somewhere, producers planned the next phase of the show. Somewhere, editors pieced together footage. Somewhere, contracts were reviewed. Somewhere, decisions were made about how much of the sisters' lives would be shared with the world. And somewhere, Tammy rested, recovering, gathering strength, exhaling quietly away from the spotlight. Fans imagined her lying under warm blankets, the little Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner of her room, the Stitch doll sitting nearby, flowers in a vase next to her bed, Andrew checking on her, the house quiet except for the hum of her breathing. They pictured it because they needed to, because the alternative images that lived in their memories were too difficult to revisit. And so, the fandom continued watching, waiting, speculating, hoping. One TikTok, one sentence, 1 week of silence. That's all it took for concern to rise like a tide. And as the days trickled by, one question became louder. If Tammy was recovering, why hadn't she posted again? Was she simply resting, or was something deeper happening behind closed doors? The quiet stretched on just long enough to make people wonder. Then, almost inevitably, the threads turned to another question. When Tammy returns online, what will she tell us? Because one thing was certain, her story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And whatever came next, whether expected or shocking, would pull fans even deeper into the emotional landscape of a journey they'd already invested years in. Tammy had always known that healing wasn't a straight line. Anyone who had lived inside a body that once weighed over 700 pounds understood that progress didn't erase the past. It only coexisted with it. Her doctors reminded her of that constantly. Her siblings reminded her gently. And her fans, the people who had watched her fall, rise, and fall again, reminded her with every worried comment they left. But nothing drove the point home more than moments like this, moments when her body simply shut down. When part 3 of her story left off, she had just returned home after a short but alarming hospitalization. Her sickness had started slow, a sore throat, exhaustion, a fever that refused to break. At first she tried to ignore it. She didn't want anyone worrying, especially not her fiancé, Adrian, who had already lived through some of the darkest chapters of her life. But her body had other plans. By the time her family realized something was wrong, Tammy was barely able to keep food down. Her breathing was heavy and uneven, a reminder of the old days, the days she dreaded even thinking about. It didn't take long before Chris insisted she be taken to the hospital. He didn't care if she insisted she was okay. He didn't care if she said she would rest. He knew the signs. He had seen them before. And he wasn't going to lose her. So when fans later saw her TikTok video and heard her say she'd been sick for a week, concerns spread like wildfire. Back now, in her home, recovering slowly, Tammy reached out instinctively for familiarity, the small things that grounded her, the things that made her feel safe. The bouquet of flowers that Adrian had picked out, the small Christmas tree he had bought because he knew decorations made her smile, and the stuffed Stitch doll, her favorite, sitting right where she had left him. She lifted the toy gently, running her fingers along its soft fabric as if it were made of something fragile. She looked tired. She looked worn down. But she also looked grateful and deeply human in a way she had once tried to hide. The video she posted wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged or polished. It was simply Tammy, talking about feeling sick, holding a stuffed animal, trying to keep her spirits up. But somehow, that little moment ignited a storm online. The misheard audio didn't help. When one Reddit user thought Tammy had said she was sick at the hospital, instead of sick for the last week, threads erupted overnight. People worried. People panicked. Some assumed the worst immediately. Others begged for updates, refreshing TikTok and Instagram like the answers might be hiding between the lines of a caption. And when another commenter stated they had actually seen Chris the day before and heard him mention Tammy was hospitalized, the concern intensified. It wasn't the first time her health had taken center stage online. But there was something different about this moment. Something heavier. Fans weren't just worried because Tammy got sick. They were worried because they knew what her body had endured. Losing more than 500 pounds doesn't erase the damage from years of strain. It doesn't magically repair a heart that's been pushed to its limit. It doesn't heal lungs that once struggled under the weight of a collapsing body. And it doesn't erase the memories, the times when her oxygen levels dipped too low, the nights she couldn't sleep without machines forcing air into her lungs. So when fans wrote things like, the effects of being over 700 pounds never go away, they weren't criticizing her. They were acknowledging the fear woven into her story, the lingering truth that no amount of success guaranteed safety. Her journey had been miraculous, yes. But miracles often carried scars. Even during recovery, Tammy felt that weight, not the physical burden she used to carry, but the emotional one. All the years she'd been judged, mocked, dismissed. All the people who told her she'd never change. The nights she cried without anyone knowing. The mornings she didn't believe she'd live long enough to see another sunrise. And now, after everything she had survived, here she was again, feeling fragile in a way she hadn't expected. The house was quiet that evening. Adrian had stepped out to grab dinner and check in with Amy and the kids, who had been worried sick since Tammy's hospitalization. He promised he wouldn't be long. He knew she hated being alone when she didn't feel well. Being alone made her mind drift places it shouldn't. So while he was gone, Tammy sat on her bed, scrolling slowly through the comments on her video. Some people sent prayers. Some sent jokes to cheer her up. Some begged her to take care of herself. But a few comments, the ones she didn't expect, nearly brought tears to her eyes. You're stronger than you know. You've come too far to stop fighting. Please don't ever think you're alone. She had spent years being the villain on her own show, the difficult sister, the stubborn patient, the woman trapped in anger and pain. It took years for people to see past that mask. Years before they celebrated her victories instead of waiting for her failures. And yet, even now, when she felt her weakest, strangers rallied around her. She looked at the screen, blinking hard. She wasn't someone who cried easily, not anymore. But tonight, the emotions felt heavier than her own heartbeat. She whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you," not just to her fans but to herself. Because she had kept going. She had survived. She had chosen life, again and again, even when it terrified her. That night, as the lights dimmed and the small Christmas tree glowed softly across the room, Tammy closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe. Really breathe. Slow, deep, steady breaths, the kind that reminded her she was still here. Still fighting. But outside the walls of her home, a different conversation was unfolding, one she couldn't control. While Tammy focused on recovering, fans were buzzing about something else, the future of 1,000-pound sisters. Rumors were spreading that the show might be canceled. Season 7 had ended with emotional breakthroughs, surgeries, weddings, and transformations. And yet there was no official word on a Season 8. But fans weren't just curious. They were desperate. This family had become part of their lives. Messy, flawed, hilarious, chaotic, heartbreaking, inspiring. Millions had grown attached to the journey of two sisters who were once trapped in their bodies, struggling to breathe, sleep, or even stand. Fans had watched them rise and relapse, fight and reconcile, lose and rebuild. And now, with Tammy recovering and Amy navigating her new marriage with Brian, the uncertainty felt unjust. Like a story being cut off mid-sentence. But whispers online suggested there was more happening behind the scenes. Fans claimed the crew had been seen filming. Camera trucks parked outside Amy's house. Equipment cases loaded into vans in New Orleans. Producers spotted taking notes while the family laughed over dinner. Something was coming. Something big.
But no one knew exactly what.
And even Tammy, sitting quietly in her dimly lit bedroom, wasn't ready for the next chapter waiting just around the corner. The kind of chapter that shifts everything. The kind of chapter that comes only after the storm. The kind of chapter that might lead her somewhere she had never dared to imagine. As she drifted into sleep, unaware of the conversations happening across Reddit threads and TikTok comments, one truth echoed quietly through the night. Her story was far from over. And the world wasn't ready for what came next. Morning light crept slowly into Tammy's room, slipping through the thin curtains like a quiet reminder that life didn't stop just because she needed rest. The soft glow painted the walls a pale gold, highlighting the little Christmas tree still twinkling on the dresser, the bouquet of flowers beginning to open, and the Stitch doll sitting faithfully at her side. Tammy blinked awake, her body aching the way it always did after long stretches of sickness. Her breathing was better now, steady, controlled, but her muscles still felt heavy, as if her bones were storing memories of the hospital bed she'd only recently left behind. She shifted slowly, careful not to push herself too hard. There were days when she woke up eager to move, full of energy she hadn't felt in decades. But today wasn't one of those days. Today, she felt fragile and she accepted that. Healing wasn't supposed to be rushed, and for once, she wasn't trying to outrun her own limits. Her phone buzzed. It took all her effort to reach for it. One message from Amy, 2 from Adrian, and a dozen notifications from TikTok and Instagram. She sighed softly, not out of frustration, but from the weight of knowing the world was watching, even when she wanted nothing more than a quiet morning with her thoughts. The message from Amy came first. Mornin'.
"You okay?"
Kids want to see you. There was a picture attached, Gage holding up a crayon drawing of Tammy, complete with a giant smile and blue eyebrows. She laughed, her chest tightening not from pain, but from emotion. Children had a way of reminding her that life could be soft, simple,
Pure.
even when adults overcomplicated everything. Tammy typed slowly, feeling a little better. Tell Gage I love his picture. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pressed send. She wasn't sure if it was weakness or nerves, maybe both. Then she opened Adrian's messages. Good morning, love.
I'm grabbing breakfast.
You need anything? Soup?
Yeah.
Your favorite chips? Be home soon. She read the messages twice, staring at the tiny heart he had added at the end. She still wasn't used to someone taking care of her. Not like this. Not with patience. Not with tenderness. Not because they felt obligated, but because they genuinely wanted to. She set the phone aside, resting her hands on her stomach as she inhaled deeply. She didn't want to cry, not this early, not when she was trying to stay strong, but her emotions had a mind of their own lately. And fans weren't helping. When she finally opened TikTok, the comment section was overflowing again. Are you okay? We love you. Please rest, hun. Don't push yourself. You look tired.
I'm worried.
You've come so far, Tammy. Don't give up. We need you for Season 8. Season 8. Those 2 words showed up everywhere. People weren't just keeping up with Tammy, they were clinging to her story like they were part of it.
And in a way, they were.
Millions had watched her fight for breath, fight for life, fight for herself. Millions had watched her fall in love, lose friends, gain confidence, and rediscover who she could be. But the question of the show's future hovered over everything like a shadow no one wanted to talk about directly. Was 1,000-pound Sisters coming back? Did Tammy have the strength to keep filming? Would the pressure, even the positive pressure, push her too hard again? She didn't know. None of them did. Not officially. But she knew one thing with certainty. Her journey wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. And she felt that truth in her bones. The kind of truth that rings like a quiet alarm inside your chest, warning you that your story still has pages left unturned. The world outside her bedroom was buzzing with whispers of Season 8. Reddit threads filled with speculation. Fans posting photos of film crews spotted outside Amy's house in Dixon. Rumors of producers flying into Louisville. Sightings of camera operators near New Orleans, following Amy and her new husband Brian on their honeymoon. If Tammy closed her eyes, she could almost feel it. The familiar hum of production vans, directors with clipboards, boom microphones peeking into frame, cameras capturing every subtle tension and every small triumph. But at the moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was getting stronger. What mattered was feeling steady again. What mattered was breathing without fear. She leaned back against her pillows, letting her mind drift. The past year replayed in fragments, her bariatric surgery, the terrifying moments leading up to it, the relief afterward. The joy of stepping on a scale and seeing numbers she hadn't seen since childhood. The disbelief when she realized she could walk without gasping. The day her doctor told her she no longer needed her trach tube. She had imagined that losing weight would erase everything hard about her life. She thought she'd wake up one day and all her health problems, all her emotional pain, all her insecurities would melt with them. But life wasn't a fairy tale like that. Even after losing so much weight, she still carried the past like a shadow. She still had to fight for every breath. She still had days where her joints ached, her skin hurt, her lungs tightened. She still had moments where her confidence cracked and old habits tried to sneak back in. Healing didn't erase history. Healing rewrote it, slowly, painfully, one day at a time. The door creaked open softly. Adrian stepped inside, holding takeout soup in one hand and a paper bag in the other. His eyes scanned her face instantly, like he was checking her temperature just by looking at her. "You okay?" he asked, voice gentle. Tammy nodded. "Tired." "You look tired," he said honestly but kindly. He set the soup down, then sat at the foot of the bed. "But better than yesterday." "Yeah," she whispered. He watched her for a moment, his expression softening. "You scared me." She swallowed hard. "I scared myself." He reached over, brushing a strand of hair away from her forehead. "You don't have to be strong all the time." She laughed weakly. "Try telling that to the internet." He smiled. "The internet doesn't get a vote. You come first." Tammy had never been great at accepting love, not without suspicion, not without waiting for the punchline. But when Adrian said things like that, she believed him. Maybe for the first time in her life, she believed someone when they said they weren't going anywhere. She leaned her head back, eyes closing as she breathed in the smell of warm broth drifting from the container beside her. A moment passed, then another, and then her phone buzzed again. Amy this time. A new message. "Call me. Important." Tammy's eyes opened slowly. The room felt different now, not darker, not colder, but charged. Like something was shifting, like something was about to break open. She picked up her phone with trembling fingers. "What now?" she whispered. But deep down, she already sensed what this might be about.
The show.
The filming. The future. The next chapter, she wasn't sure she was ready for. Tammy pressed the call button and lifted the phone to her ear. The line rang once.
Twice.
And then Amy answered, breathless.
Rushed.
Almost on the verge of something big. "Tam," she said, voice unsteady. "You need to hear this." And just like that, the world shifted again, quietly but unmistakably, pulling Tammy towards something she couldn't yet see. Something that would change everything. Tammy pressed the phone tighter to her ear, her breath catching slightly as she listened to the tension in Amy's voice. It wasn't often that Amy sounded like this. Worried?
Sure.
Overwhelmed? Absolutely. But this was different. There was urgency, mixed with something she couldn't fully place. Something between fear and excitement. "What's going on?" Tammy asked, pushing herself up a little straighter despite the ache in her body. Amy exhaled hard, like she had been holding her breath too long. "They called."
"Who?"
"The producers." Tammy's heart skipped. She didn't need Amy to clarify which producers. There was only one group that could make Amy sound like this. About the show? Tammy whispered. Yeah, Amy said, voice tightening as she tried to hold onto whatever emotion was pushing through her. It's happening, Tam. They're confirming season 8. For a moment, Tammy said nothing. The words hung in the quiet space between her and the flickering Christmas tree lights. She felt her stomach twist, not from sickness this time, but from something deeper. Something conflicted. Season 8. Part of her expected this. People online practically knew before she did. A cruise had been spotted in multiple states. Fans had posted blurry photos of cameras following Amy and Brian in New Orleans. Someone even commented that a producer was seen in Dixon wearing a hoodie from Season 6 production. But hearing it confirmed hearing Amy say it out loud, that was different. It made everything real. Too real. How do you feel? Amy asked after a moment, her voice suddenly small, almost fragile. Tammy breathed slowly. I don't know yet. And that was the truth. She didn't know if she felt relieved or scared. Part of her missed filming, the structure, the routine, the purpose it gave her on days when she felt lost. And there was comfort in knowing people cared. People followed her journey. People rooted for her. But another part of her remembered the pressure. The way cameras captured everything, every argument, every breakdown, every vulnerable moment. She remembered the voice in her head that whispered, "Don't mess up on camera, Tammy. Don't fail in front of the whole world." She remembered comments dissecting her weight, her attitude, her breathing, her tone of voice. And now, with her health trembling again, was she ready?
Tam?
Amy said softly. You still there? Yeah, Tammy replied. They want us to start soon, Amy continued. Like, real soon. Producers said they want to get filming before the holidays. Before Christmas? Tammy asked, eyes widening. Yep. That wasn't much time. Weeks, maybe less. The thought made Tammy's chest tighten. I know you're still recovering, Amy added gently, as if she could hear Tammy's heartbeat from 2 towns away. I told them you've been sick. I told them you were in the hospital. They said they'll work around it. Tammy scoffed lightly. Work around it? They say that every season. Amy didn't disagree. There was always pressure to film, to keep the storyline moving, to capture the drama and the triumphs and the family chaos that people couldn't get enough of. And while Amy tried to shield Tammy whenever she could, the weight of the show often fell on Tammy's shoulders whether she wanted it or not. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Amy said after a long pause. If you're not ready, I'll tell them. That made Tammy hesitate. Because the truth was it wasn't just her story anymore. It never had been. The show was their family's income, their platform, their legacy whether people liked it or not. The crew had become part of their lives. Fans had become part of their journey. And Tammy knew that without the show, some people would forget her. Forget her progress. Forget what she endured. The show didn't just document her transformation. It validated it. Tammy closed her eyes, letting the silence stretch before she spoke. What about you? You okay with this? Amy hesitated.
Yeah.
Yeah and no. What's wrong? You know Brian, she said. He's fine with the cameras, but it's a lot. Being married again. The kids. Mom wanting to visit more. And now the show starting up again. It's like everything's happening at once. Tammy nodded slowly. There it was, the stress Amy tried to bury under jokes and half smiles. You can tell me the truth, Tammy whispered.
I'm tired, Tam, Amy admitted.
Her voice cracked just a little. I'm just really tired. Tammy felt a pang in her chest. She wasn't the only one carrying weight that wasn't physical. Guess we both been sick, Tammy said quietly. Yeah, Amy breathed. Different ways, but yeah. The line fell silent for a moment, sisters sitting in their own storms, connected through a phone but separated by the heaviness each carried. You think we can do this? Amy finally asked. Tammy swallowed. We've done everything else. Amy laughed softly through her nose. True. Tammy looked toward her window, the morning sun growing brighter. Outside, the world moved on, cars passing, neighbors walking dogs, kids waiting for school buses. Ordinary life continued, even when hers felt like it was always on display.
Tam,
Amy said, voice soft again. You don't gotta decide today. I just wanted to tell you. I know, Tammy said, her voice low. Thanks. We'll figure it out. We always do. After they hung up, Tammy stared at the blank ceiling for a long time. Adrian came in moments later, carrying a bowl of soup he had been reheating in the microwave. He placed it gently on the tray table and sat beside her. Everything okay? He asked carefully. Tammy didn't answer immediately. She wasn't even sure how to. Producers called, she finally said. Adrian nodded slowly. I figured they would. They want to start filming soon. He didn't look surprised. Not even a little. Instead, he looked at her the same way he always did, like he was studying her face, reading her emotions as if they were written in ink across her skin. How does that make you feel? He asked. Tammy shrugged, though her hands trembled slightly. Like I'm being pulled back into something before I'm ready. Adrian reached for her hand. Then don't say yes until you are ready. It's not that simple. Why? He asked gently. Tammy looked down. Because it's not just me anymore. The show, it keeps the family going.
people depend on it.
Fans depend on it. Amy's got her kids. You and me got plans. Everyone's tied to it. But your health comes first, he said firmly. My health hasn't come first in a long time. He squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing the back of her knuckles. Then maybe now is the time to change that. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to imagine a world where she could step back, focus on herself, heal without cameras documenting her every breath. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she could let go of the show completely. Not after everything it had brought her. Pain, yes, but also purpose. Also identity. Also connection. And that scared her most of all. Because the show wasn't just something she did. It was something she had become. Tammy's chest tightened, not from sickness, but from uncertainty, from the crossroads suddenly stretching out before her. As she stared at the soft glow from the Christmas tree lights, she felt a quiet shift inside her, a question forming in the space between fear and ambition. Was she strong enough to return to the screen? Or did she need, for the first time in her life, to choose herself over the world watching her? She wasn't sure yet, but the answer was coming, whether she was ready or not. The week that followed brought a strange rhythm into Tammy's life, a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. Days blurred together, alternating between slow recovery, small bursts of energy, and the quiet hum of a world that refused to wait for her to catch up. Even when she wanted nothing more than to sink into the stillness, reminders of reality kept pushing in. Phone notifications, social media alerts, whispered updates from Amy, Adrian checking in constantly, all of it formed a weight that settled heavily across her chest. But amidst that weight, Tammy began to notice something else. Resilience. A quiet, stubborn resilience she had built over decades of struggle. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself with fanfare. It simply existed, quietly, in the small choices she made every morning. The decision to get out of bed, to eat something nourishing, to breathe deeply and tell herself she was strong enough for one more day. She clung to those small victories like lifelines. Adrian continued to be her anchor. He would sit beside her, reading aloud from the comments, sharing small moments of joy he found online, reminding her she had people who cared even when she felt invisible. He brought her favorite chips, her favorite drinks, her favorite comfort foods. He was tireless, patient, and never condescending. For Tammy, who had spent much of her life defending herself, this kind of unconditional care was disorienting, almost unbelievable. And yet, she let herself lean into it. But the looming presence of the show, and the knowledge that filming might begin sooner than she wanted, hung over her like a storm cloud. Even with Adrian's support, she couldn't ignore it. Every time she glanced at her phone or heard a ping of a new message, she felt a rush of adrenaline and anxiety. What if they expected her to step back in too soon? What if her body couldn't handle it? What if she faltered in front of the cameras again? Her health was improving, slowly but surely, but there was a fragility she couldn't shake. Her body was still recovering from weeks of sickness, her energy levels unpredictable, her mind a swirl of worry. She found herself measuring every movement, calculating how far she could walk, how long she could stand, when she should rest. Every day was a negotiation between her will to move forward and her body's insistence on pause. And then, one afternoon, she got another call from Amy. The kind of call that made her heart skip. "Tam, you need to hear this," Amy said, her tone urgent but careful. "They're serious about filming next week. They want you ready." Tammy paused, swallowing hard. "Ready? I'm not sure I am." "I know," Amy said softly. "I told them. They said they'd work around it. But they're counting on us. The fans are counting on us. And honestly, so am I." Tammy closed her eyes, leaning back against the pillows. It wasn't just the fans. It wasn't just the cameras. It was family. It was responsibility. It was the weight of expectation pressing down, the kind of pressure that never leaves no matter how many pounds you lose. And suddenly, she felt a wave of something she hadn't felt in months, fear. Not the kind she could push away with logic or distraction. This fear dug deep into her bones. It whispered about setbacks, relapses, mistakes, judgment, failure. It reminded her of every time she had felt helpless. But alongside that fear, there was something else. Determination. The kind of determination that comes from surviving nearly impossible odds, from clawing yourself back from the brink, from proving to yourself every single day that you could endure more than anyone imagined. Tammy had survived illness, hospitalization, surgeries, public scrutiny, and the daily mental battles that accompanied weight loss. She had faced loneliness, doubt, and pain. And yet here she was. Somehow, she always returned. Adrian came in then, sensing the storm inside her. He placed his hand over hers, giving her a steadying presence. "Whatever happens next, you're not doing it alone," he said. "We face it together." She looked at him, eyes shimmering, and realized that was true. She had survived all this time not because she was strong in isolation, but because she had people who loved her, who believed in her, who held her up when she couldn't stand alone. The next week arrived faster than she expected. Crew members began showing up at Amy's house first, setting up lights, cameras, and production equipment. Tammy and Adrian watched cautiously from a distance, making sure she was fully aware of every step, every interaction. The first day of filming wasn't about drama or confrontation. It was about establishing comfort, capturing reality, letting Tammy ease back into the rhythm she had once known. And yet, the presence of cameras brought an undeniable tension. Every movement, every gesture, every word felt amplified. Tammy found herself analyzing herself even more critically than before. How she breathed, how she walked, how she interacted with Adrian, how she laughed. It was exhausting, and yet exhilarating in its own strange way. Because this was her story, her life, her voice. And despite the fear, she realized something she hadn't in a long time. She still had the power to tell it, to shape it, to own it. By the second day of filming, Tammy began to find her rhythm again. Small victories marked the hours. Laughing at a joke with Adrian on camera, answering a fan question, taking a moment to simply breathe and observe the crew moving around her without feeling overwhelmed. Each small step became a victory in itself, a quiet affirmation that she could continue, even under scrutiny. But lurking beneath the triumphs, a question remained, one that would not leave her alone. How far could she push herself? Because even as her body grew stronger, even as her mind adjusted to the filming routine, the remnants of her illness were still present. Fatigue could strike at any moment. Her health was fragile, a delicate balance she had to respect. And if she ignored the warning signs, there could be consequences, public, private, and deeply personal. It was a test unlike any she had faced before. A test not just of her physical strength, not just of her emotional resilience, but of her ability to reconcile the demands of a life lived in public with the needs of a body that demanded care, attention, and respect. And as cameras rolled, Lights shone, and the hum of the crew filled the room. Tammy felt it. The pulse of life continuing, the story unfolding, the journey pressing forward, with all its uncertainty, drama, and raw, unfiltered reality. She had survived worse. She had overcome more. And she would face this too. Because her story was far from over, and no illness, no doubt, no obstacle could stop her from continuing the path she had fought so hard to walk. And deep down, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, she would not just survive. She would endure. She would rise. And the world would watch. The days stretched into a rhythm that was both familiar and foreign to Tammy. Filming had begun in earnest, but it wasn't the same as before. Before, every challenge had been about survival, shedding pounds, fighting the pain, battling the demons inside herself. Now, the fight was different. It was about balance, about listening to her body, honoring its limits, and still showing the world her story in all its rawness. Every morning began the same way, slow stretches in bed, a deep breath to steady her heart, and careful planning of the day. Adrian remained a constant presence, his patience and care forming a quiet shield around her. Amy was nearby, juggling filming, children, and her own recovery from the whirlwind of her recent wedding. And the crew, while professional and unobtrusive, reminded Tammy that the cameras never truly left her side. The first scene of the day was deceptively simple, a breakfast with Adrian and a conversation about the week ahead. But for Tammy, simplicity was never simple. Every bite of food, every laugh, every pause in conversation felt magnified. The camera lenses didn't just capture her face, they captured the subtle tension in her shoulders, the faint tremor in her hands, the way she measured her words like she was walking a tightrope. And yet, as she spoke, she realized something remarkable. She was not afraid. Not in the way she had been in the past. Not when the world had scrutinized her every move. Not when comments online dissected her progress or doubted her strength. This time, she felt a quiet certainty beneath the nerves, a recognition that she was telling her story on her own terms. The crew noticed it too. Their cameras caught the confidence, subtle but undeniable, in her posture and tone. The editors later remarked that her presence was magnetic, even in the most mundane moments. That's the thing about Tammy. She didn't need drama to command attention. Her story itself, the life she had lived and survived, was compelling enough. Yet, amid the small triumphs, reality tugged relentlessly at her heels. Some days were harder than others. Fatigue would descend without warning. Muscles that hadn't fully healed ached under her weight. And there were moments when she sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at comments, wondering if she was strong enough to keep going. It was during one of these quiet, reflective moments that a notification lit up her screen. Another message from a fan, simple but heavy in meaning. "You inspire me every day. Keep going, Tammy. You've come so far." She read it twice, then 3 times, letting the words sink in. It wasn't just about weight loss, not really. It was about survival, about resilience, about enduring in a world that often seemed determined to watch you fall. Tammy felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel fully in months. Pride. Not pride in a number on a scale, or in a surgery, or in public approval, but pride in herself. In the fact that she had survived. In the fact that she had returned to a world that could have been overwhelming, and yet found her voice within it. The filming day ended quietly. Lights dimmed, cameras were packed away, and the crew retreated to their trailers. Tammy leaned back against the couch, exhaustion mingling with relief. Adrian handed her a glass of water, and she accepted it gratefully, feeling the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. "You did good today," he said softly. "Better than good. You were amazing." Tammy smiled weakly. "Amazing? Really?" "Yes," he said, his eyes unwavering. "You were human. You were raw. You were honest. That's what matters." She nodded, letting herself believe it for just a moment. But even as she tried to bask in the small victory, a shadow lingered, questions that refused to leave her alone. Could she maintain this pace? Could her body handle the constant filming? Could she remain strong in front of the cameras while still listening to the limits her body was demanding? And beyond the physical challenges, there was another weight pressing down, the expectations. From fans, from family, from producers, from herself. Every moment caught on camera was a performance, even if the performance was simply being herself. And the fear of failure, of letting someone down, of faltering on screen, was a pressure she had never been able to ignore. That night, Tammy lay in bed, staring at the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights. Adrian slept quietly beside her, his breathing steady, his hand resting gently on hers. And in the quiet, Tammy reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the days she had struggled to breathe under the weight of over 600 pounds, to the nights she had lain awake, wondering if she would see another sunrise, to the surgeries, the recoveries, the setbacks, the small victories, to every step had led to this fragile but undeniable moment. She had fought for life before. She had fought for love before. And now, she was fighting for herself in a new way, balancing ambition, health, and the relentless gaze of the world. Somewhere deep in her mind, Tammy understood a truth she couldn't yet articulate fully. This season, this chapter, this journey, it wasn't just about weight, surgery, or recovery anymore. It was about life itself, about resilience, about choosing to continue, even when the path was uncertain. And as sleep finally claimed her, Tammy felt the first stirrings of hope in months, a cautious, fragile hope, yes, but hope nonetheless. Because the cameras would roll, the fans would watch, the world would see, but more importantly, Tammy would endure. And she was ready to take that next step. The following morning arrived with an unexpected quietness, a reprieve from the hum of cameras and the constant presence of the crew. Tammy felt it immediately, a rare space to breathe without expectation. Yet, even in the calm, her mind was restless. The events of the past weeks lingered, refusing to fade. The hospital visit, the whispers of fans online, the weight of a season yet to film. It was all there, pressing at her from every angle. She sat at the edge of her bed, holding her favorite Stitch doll. The small toy, with its wide, innocent eyes, had become more than just a keepsake. It was a tether to simpler moments, a reminder that even amidst chaos, she could find something steady. Adrian watched her silently from the doorway, sensing the swirl of thought behind her gaze, but wisely holding his comments at bay. Sometimes, the most powerful support was simply presence. "You okay?" he asked softly. Tammy looked up, blinking rapidly as though trying to clear her thoughts. I just need to make sense of it all." Adrian nodded. "I understand. But you don't have to figure it all out at once." She smiled faintly. "I wish it worked that way." The weight of her journey wasn't something that could be neatly organized or rationalized. Every step forward had been hard won, every decision fraught with uncertainty. Losing hundreds of pounds had changed her body, yes, but it hadn't erased the years of struggle, the lingering fatigue, or the emotional scars etched deep into her identity. Tammy's phone buzzed again. Another message. Another reminder that the world beyond her room was alive and watching. This time, it was a message from a fan she hadn't interacted with before. "Watching you fight makes me want to fight too.
Keep going.
We believe in you." Her chest tightened. She read it again, then put the phone down. She didn't need validation, yet somehow, in moments like these, it mattered. Not because she wanted to please others, but because she realized the ripple of her story reached far beyond herself. People were rooting for her, seeing strength where she sometimes saw weakness. And that responsibility, however heavy, was part of who she had become. Adrian sat down beside her, quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, careful not to push. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Tammy exhaled slowly. "Do I feel strong?"
Not always, he said.
"But you act like it. And that counts too." For once, she didn't argue. Instead, she let the words settle, softening the tension coiled tight in her chest. It was a rare reprieve, but fleeting. The real challenge waited outside the walls of her bedroom, The cameras, the crew, the fans, the endless online speculation. The public eye never paused, and neither did the pressure it brought. By mid-morning, the first filming session of the day began. Adrian helped her down the stairs, guiding her carefully as she adjusted to the movement. The crew had set up in the living room, a space that was intimate yet under constant scrutiny. Every gesture, every step, every glance was captured. Tammy felt the familiar flicker of nerves, the weight of expectation pressing down. But she also felt a new determination, a quiet resilience that had been tempered by months of recovery and reflection. She had faced the worst moments of her life and survived. She had endured public scrutiny, hospital visits, surgeries, and setbacks. And now, standing in the midst of her home, surrounded by cameras and lights, she understood something crucial. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about agency, about reclaiming her story on her terms. The cameras rolled, capturing moments that could easily have been ordinary. Tammy laughing with Adrian, sipping tea, talking about small, everyday plans. But in these ordinary moments, there was depth, vulnerability,
Strength.
She realized that the essence of her journey wasn't the dramatic, headline-grabbing events. It was the quiet, persistent courage of continuing forward when life demanded it most. During a brief break, she stepped outside onto the porch. The air was crisp, brushing her face with a freshness that felt almost electric. She took a deep breath, letting the sensation fill her lungs, noticing the strength it required, and the triumph in simply standing there, feeling the wind, feeling alive. Adrian joined her, his hand brushing hers lightly. "You're doing more than just filming," he said. "You're showing people what it means to endure." Tammy let that sink in. The enormity of it, the fact that her struggles, her triumphs, her vulnerability could impact others. She felt both humbled and terrified by the responsibility. And in that moment, she understood the power of her story. Not because it was perfect, not because it was easy, but because it was real. When they returned inside, filming resumed. The sessions stretched into afternoon and evening, each take bringing its own challenges, each interaction a reminder that she had to pace herself carefully. Yet, she noticed something remarkable. She was beginning to feel a rhythm again, an ebb and flow that allowed her to be herself without being overwhelmed. The crew, carefully attentive, began to treat her less like a spectacle and more like a collaborator, adjusting lighting, camera angles, and schedules to accommodate her pace. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As night fell, Tammy collapsed onto the couch, her body exhausted, yet her mind buzzing. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, from hospitals and surgeries to heartbreak and resilience, from fear and doubt to small, persistent victories. And she understood that the coming days would be no different, a delicate balancing act between health, story, and expectation. Yet for the first time in weeks, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that she could continue. Hope that she could endure. Hope that she could reclaim her life and her narrative without losing herself in the process. And as she stared at the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights, Adrian's hand resting on hers, she realized one undeniable truth. Her story wasn't just being filmed. It was being lived. And no amount of sickness, doubt, or expectation could take that away. But even with hope rising, a quiet tension remained, one she knew she couldn't ignore. Because life, as always, had a way of testing her when she least expected it. The next morning arrived with a heavy, electric quiet. The house felt charged, as if it were holding its breath for what was to come. Tammy sat at the kitchen table, a cup of warm tea in her hands, feeling the familiar tremor of anticipation. She wasn't sure if it was excitement, anxiety, or a mixture of both, but it was unmistakable. Filming had become a part of her life again, but the stakes felt different this season. It wasn't just about the cameras capturing weight loss or surgeries anymore. It was about life itself, resilience, recovery, love, and the ongoing journey of healing. Every movement she made, every word she spoke, every glance she shared with Adrian and Amy mattered more than ever. She carried not only her own story, but the weight of the journey she had shared with millions of viewers who had been with her since day one. Adrian entered the kitchen, offering a reassuring smile. "Ready for another day?" he asked softly. Tammy nodded, though her chest tightened slightly at the thought of the cameras, the crew, and the expectation. "As ready as I'll ever be," she whispered. The filming day began in earnest, capturing moments that were both ordinary and profound. Tammy moved through her home with caution but confidence, engaging with the crew, laughing when appropriate, and speaking from the heart when prompted. There was a rhythm now, one she hadn't had in months, a rhythm of balance between vulnerability and control. Amy joined her later in the morning, camera ready and equally mindful of Tammy's pace. Together, the sisters navigated the sessions, sharing laughter, small disagreements, and heartfelt conversations that felt genuine and unfiltered. It was a delicate dance, each step choreographed not by the crew but by the life they had lived and survived together. But beneath the surface, tension remained. Tammy felt it in her body. The fatigue, the ache, the lingering effects of her recent illness. She felt it in her mind, the constant awareness of being watched, judged, and relied upon. And she felt it in her heart, the weight of expectation, the push and pull between the woman she was becoming and the woman the world wanted to see. Yet, even in that tension, there was clarity. Tammy realized that the journey wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about avoiding mistakes, faltering, or fear. It was about endurance, about showing up, about living authentically, even when the world was watching. By mid-afternoon, Tammy found herself on the porch again, the wind brushing her face, the sunlight casting warm shadows across the yard. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, savoring the sensation of air filling her lungs without struggle. For a moment, the cameras felt distant, the noise of the world fading into the background. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "This is life. Right here.
Right now."
Adrian joined her, sitting quietly beside her. No words were needed. Their presence alone spoke volumes, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had endured and everything they still faced. Together, they watched as life moved on around them, as ordinary and extraordinary moments unfolded in tandem. When filming wrapped for the day, Tammy collapsed into her bed, exhausted but exhilarated. The glow from the Christmas tree illuminated the room, soft and comforting. She reflected on the journey, the hospitalizations, the surgeries, the public scrutiny, the triumphs, and the setbacks. Every step had led her here, to a place where she could embrace her story fully, without fear of judgment, without hiding her vulnerability. She thought of her fans, of the countless messages, the prayers, the encouragement. She thought of Adrian, Amy, and her family, who had stood beside her through every trial. And she thought of herself, Tammy Slaton, the woman who had survived the impossible, who had faced her fears, and who had chosen life time and time again. A quiet sense of peace settled over her, mingled with the lingering awareness that challenges would continue to arise. Life would always test her, push her, demand more than she thought she could give. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next. Because she understood a fundamental truth. Strength wasn't the absence of fear, pain, or struggle. Strength was choosing to move forward despite it. Strength was surviving when the odds seemed impossible. Strength was living authentically, fully, and without apology. As Tammy drifted to sleep that night, she felt a quiet certainty settle deep in her chest. The cameras, the fans, the public attention, they would continue. The journey would continue. And she would continue with it. Her story, far from over, had reached a moment of clarity, courage, and hope. And though the world watched, she had reclaimed the most important part of her narrative, herself.